Hi, my name is Steve,
And my name is Dan.
and we recently wrote a paper showing that and we recently wrote a paper showing that GPT, which is the large language model underlying the artificial intelligence chatbot ChatGPT, can be used as an effective and easy to use tool for analyzing psychological constructs in text across multiple different languages.
And in this tutorial, we'll show you how you can analyze your own text data using GPT in R.
So what you're going to want to do first is you're going to want to look at our paper, which you can either find by Googling this title here, or you can also look at the link to our paper in the description. And once you get to our paper, you're going to want to go to the supplementary materials, and you're going to want to look at our OSF page, which is linked right here. And when you're at our OSF page, you're going to want to click here, and then you're going to want to download our OSF files as a zip. So it's downloading here. We have already downloaded this and saved it to our desktop. So you can download this folder and save it to anywhere you'd like on your computer. And once you've done that, you're going to want to go into R. And you're going to want to open a script within the folder you just downloaded called GPT example code.r. And once you have opened the script, which you're going to want to open within RStudio or whatever program you use to use R files in, first, you will want to load in the required packages for analyses, which are these required packages. Then you are going to want to set the folder that you just downloaded from your OSF as your working directory. So we saved the folder to the desktop of this computer. So right here, we just set the working directory to the folder that we downloaded to our desktop. And then before you use GPT in R, you first need to get a GPT API key, which Dan is going to explain how to do.
Right, so you first want to go to the OpenAI website. We put the link in there for convenience. So if you don't yet have an account, you want to first make an account and set up billing. Once you have an account, you can go to the top right corner to this menu and click View API Keys. And this is going to show you a list of all the API keys you have generated so far. So an API key is like a password that allows you to access the API. It's just like a password, it's meant to be secret. So actually, the OpenAI website doesn't show, you can see that you can't really see the full key for protection purposes. You'll only see it once when you create a new key. So let's try to create a new key. So you'll click here and you want to give it a name. So let's call it GPT tutorial key. And then this is where it, this is the only time it shows you the actual key. So you want to save it for later use. So the simplest thing is to copy it and go to the script and put it here. And this is what you want to do in any case to then access the API through the code. But if and then you'll click done, and then you won't be able to see it again. And of course, this is we made this just for the tutorial, so we'll delete it after. If you ever want to delete a key, you can click on this little trash can and revoke the key, and that will delete it. And you can always create new secret keys that are linked to your account. And then you want to, of course, assign this key to the myAPI variable. And then you're good to go to prompt GPT using this function that Steve is going to tell you about.
Yeah, so the main function that you use to call the GPT API in R is called Hey ChatGPT. And this function was adapted from a very useful blog post that I'd recommend checking out, which is about analyzing GPT in R, and it provides more details than the details we're showing in this tutorial. And I won't explain every single parameter of this function because some of it you don't really need to know or is a bit technical. But there are two parameters that you might be interested in. So one is this model parameter, and it allows you to set the specific GPT model that you want to use. So here we are using the GPT 3.5 model. And we found in our paper that this model was very effective at analyzing psychological constructs and texts across several languages. But as you might already know, there is a more recent version of GPT called GPT-4, which is slightly better at a number of tasks. It's also slightly more expensive to use, or actually about 10 times more expensive to use. So given the fact that this model is cheaper and it's also easier to access right now, you have to apply for special access to GPT-4. You might find this to be the most useful for a text analysis task for now. But if you want a full list of models, you can go to this link right here and you can try out various different models. But here we're using GPT 3.5. And there is another parameter called temperature, which we set to 0 here. And temperature is a parameter which determines how deterministic the GPT output is going to be. So temperature can be a number between 0 and 2. And we set the temperature to 0, which means the GPT will give the most deterministic output. So if you run Hey ChatGPT over and over again, you will get the same output every single time if the temperature is 0. But if you set the temperature to, for instance, 1 or 1.5, the output will be less deterministic. And once you get closer to 2, the output will seem relatively random. And you might want less deterministic output for various use cases, like if you're simulating participants and you want a little bit of variation. For text analysis tasks, it might be most useful to set the temperature to 0. That's what we did in our paper, so that your output is most reproducible. You get the same output every time. Also, if you set temperature to 0, you essentially get GPT's best guess, basically what GPT thinks is the best answer. So we recommended it 0 for text analysis tasks, but you might want to play around with the temperature variable. So I'm going to run this, and then I'm going to show you an example of how you can essentially talk to GPT in R. So you can say, hey, ChatGPT, is the sky blue? And now GPT gave you an answer saying that the sky happens to be blue. And now Dan's going to show you how you can use this function to analyze larger data sets of text data.
Right. So I'm going to show you with using an example from our paper, actually the first data set we analyzed in our paper, how you can do this text analysis task through for a whole data set at one time. So first thing you want to do is to read in your data set of choice. So using the read_CSV function. And then you want to create a GPT column that you essentially fill with NAs. So it's an empty column to start with, and that you'll then populate with GPT's answers. So let me just show you how the data set looks. Essentially there's a text column that is the text you want to analyze. So this is a data set of tweets. So it's short text. And we have here a human column because, in our paper, we were comparing GPT's performance to human performance from human annotators. So this is the labels given by human annotators. And this is a sentiment analysis task. So classification task with 3 possible options, positive, neutral, and negative. And they're coded as numbers from 1 to 3. And here's the GPT column we just created, and we're going to populate it with GPT's answers using a for loop. So we're going to loop essentially through the rows. So I is the number of rows. Well, you basically want to set it for I in 1 to the number of rows. Here we're just going to do 10 rows for just as an example, because if your data set is really long, it can take a while to run everything. So the first part of this for loop is the question. So essentially what you're asking GPT to do, depending on your task. So in our case, because it was a sentiment analysis task, our question is the sentiment of this text positive, neutral, or negative? You probably want to keep this question simple and straightforward for GPT to parse. And we also found that GPT gives the most interpretable, most analyzable answers when you explicitly ask it to answer only with a number. So in this case, because it's a classification task, we're essentially giving it the mappings between the numbers and the classes. So 1 if positive, 2 if neutral, 3 if negative. You can also do the same thing for Likert scales, for example, which we also did in the paper, or even for continuous, more continuous scales. So for example, 1 to 800, you just have to describe what the ends of the scale mean. And then you want to highlight that the text is following, and then you're going to read in the text from the respective row in the data set. And then you're going to concatenate using this paste function in R, the question and the text. And just to show you how that looks, the concat variable is looks like this. So is the sentiment, so the question and then the tweet, which in this case is incidentally about Ariana Grande. And then you're going to run, just like Steve showed you with the is the sky is blue question, you're going to run the hey ChatGPT function on this concatenated text. And I'm just going to try now. So maybe you noticed that it took a few milliseconds. Sometimes it can take up to a couple of seconds to run this. It's slower for GPT-4. And then you can look at the results. So in our case, GPT gave the answer 2, which corresponds to neutral sentiment. So it thought the sentiment of this tweet was neutral. Then we have a few lines of code here that we added because the GPT and this hey ChatGPT function sometimes gives a blank output. Which can break down the loop, the for loop, and also means that you have to go back and fill in the gaps so you don't have missing data. So in order to prevent that, we added this while loop that essentially keeps trying with the same text until GPT gives an answer. And then we print the result, and then we assign the result to the corresponding row in the GPT column. So I'm just going to run it for these 10 first rows just to see how it looks. So we're printing the index of the row and the output of GPT. We're doing this just something. I think you can also print, for example, the human value to see if the two match. Just as a visual cue, or you can not print anything if you prefer that. And then just to look at the data set to see how it now looks. So we can see that the GPT column has been populated with the first 10 values. And you can see that GPT did the task pretty well in terms of only giving us numbers from 1 to 3. And then there's only a couple more steps until the end, and Steve is going to tell you about them.
Yeah, so there are only 2 more lines of code, and basically this line of code right here just takes the first character of GPT's output. And you'll want to do this because sometimes GPT will output, even though you ask only for a number, it will sometimes say 1 dash neutral or 1 parentheses neutral, and you only want the first character, so you just get the answer 1. So you just run this line of code to make sure you get the first character. And finally, you will want to turn GPT's output into a numeric output because it will automatically output a string, basically. And if you turn it into a numeric, it means you can analyze these numbers using statistics. And that concludes our tutorial. I hope you enjoyed and find this useful.